Pete Vere, and I have with me Pastor Stephen Boissoin, I think you said it's pronounced?
Pretty close. Boissoin.
Boissoin.
Yeah.
Good. And the reason I have Stephen with me today is we had interviewed for the book I'm doing with Kathy Shadle on the human rights tribunals in Canada and the decisions that always come down against Christians. And what I found was I found a man that was very loving and very sincere in his Christian faith, and that hasn't always been reflected in the media. And so I wanted to give Stephen the opportunity to respond and to give my readers and my listeners the opportunity to hear us interact so that they could get the other side of the story. So on that note, I'll open up with something you said is that you do not bear any hatred towards homosexuals.
I do not at all, actually. I just finished having a 1-hour-long conversation with a homosexual gentleman that contacted me through my website. We had a beautiful conversation, and I made that more than clear that I certainly don't feel any anger or bitterness towards anyone who's homosexual.
Yeah. So really what you were criticizing was the lifestyle or certain acts within the lifestyle that you feel contravene the Bible.
From a general pastoral point, yes, I would have to answer to that, but that's not what my letter was about. If one rereads it after this conversation that you and I have, or this interview you and I have, that letter was specifically directed towards activists that are bringing in a biased, pro-homosexual, aggressive mandate to teach their view of things to children from kindergarten classes up.
Okay. And we'll touch on that on a point, but when we're talking about the letter, one thing you had mentioned to me in our previous conversation is the title, which right here says Homosexual Agenda Wicked. That wasn't actually your title.
No, I didn't know whether to agree with it or disagree. I'll be very honest. When I first saw it, the title was picked by the Red Deer Advocate. I had no say in the matter at all. They just picked the titles to letters to the editors and put them in big and bold. I'm sure I've said similar things within the letter, so I don't know how much there's a defense there anyways, but I did not choose that title.
Okay. And I think that's something, because, I mean, even in my writings about your case, I said, Pastor Boissoin said, and those weren't actually your words. Your words were a lot more detailed, and they were a lot more within a specific context, which raises another question. You've tried to clarify the context of your letter, but you haven't really been given an opportunity, is something you had mentioned.
I've fortunately been given the opportunity, obviously, on the Christian side of the fence, but I did not have what I believe is an equal opportunity to not only state what my context and the interpretation of my letter was. After all, I'm the one who wrote it. I should be able to interpret it.
Yeah.
What I felt at the tribunal hearing and in the public, if there's been a lot of this, is that people have had like the Darren Lunds, have had the liberty of interpreting the letter for me. And I actually just read an article today on the internet and saw that happened again, where they had taken one section out of my article and reworded it, and it didn't mean that at all. And as I've tried to explain that, I've often been persecuted for doing so.
Sure. Can you give a specific example of something that was taken out of context that was spun one way, even though you intended something completely different by it?
Yeah, I think the two biggest ones, there's been others, but I think the two that have been really used and abused have been, one, war has been declared which was obviously, in my context, an ideological, socio-political war that I was no longer going to stand and do nothing while these agendas were being propagated in my own community, in the schools within my community. I was going to stand out. I was going to sound the alarm through that letter, etc., whereas that has been twisted into was I condoning and did I have anything to do with a teen who was beaten
Yes.
2 weeks after my letter was written, a homosexual teen, which is utterly ridiculous. I would stand and protect any teen like my own brother. The second one would be somewhere in the letter I had said that homosexual activists and those that support them, so the homosexual machine, the propaganda machine, that again in context with that letter that is moving into schools to teach their biased agenda and attacking anyone who opposes it, that mandate, teaching and manipulating impressionable little children, is just as wicked from my theological perspective, just as immoral, just as deceptive as a pedophile to a child, as a pimp to a young girl, as a drug dealer to a child. That is the context that has been twisted into, that I called all gays everywhere just as wicked as pedophiles, as drug dealers, as pimps. That is not what I was saying.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you have a theological objection based on your Christian faith to homosexual acts, but in this case, when you made the comparison to drug dealers and pimps, you were talking about a specific type of activism.
Yes.
So I
believe it's very hard for the majority of Canadians and possibly Americans too, because I think the vast majority of people have no idea what's taking. I think they're just starting to realize. They're just starting to come out of their slumber and realize what has already come in the back door, what is already deeply ingrained in the public school systems.
Yeah, and I can understand where you're coming from, but I want to get back to your first point about war. I mean, it sounds to me like really what you're speaking about here is Ephesians, the sort of the spiritual warfare going on.
Obviously, the weapons of my warfare, 2 Corinthians, I think, are not the same weapons of the warfare that is spun, by the Darren Lunds, trying to capitalize on any term that he can to try to make me look like I'm some hateful animal. The weapons of my warfare are the teachings of truth out of the Word of God, combined with science that is revealing more and more that promiscuity, period, whether it be heterosexual or homosexual, but homosexuality in this case, which was the issue of the day and today, is a very, very dangerous lifestyle psychologically, physically. And so all of that entwined in one definitely was my perspective.
Yeah, and there's two questions spinning